Thanks for joining me. My name is Sean Egglestone, and I'm a registered dietitian. And today I'm going to be going over my presentation, Why the Ketogenic Diet May Be the Worst Way to Eat. If you head on over to my website, seantheRD.com, you can find a copy of my ketogenic diet paper that this presentation is based off of. Before we can get into the dangers of following a ketogenic diet, it's important to have a basic understanding of where the ketogenic diet came from. The ketogenic diet really came to light in the 1920s as a treatment for childhood epilepsy. What scientists found was that when children consumed a diet high in fat and low in carbohydrates, that their seizure activity was reduced or eliminated. It was never intended to be a weight loss program for adults nearly a century later. The ketogenic diet has a macronutrient ratio of 60% of its calories from fat, 30% from protein, and 10% or less from carbohydrates, or less than 50 grams of carbohydrates daily. When we consume a diet that's low in carbohydrates and higher in fat, we switch from using sugar or glucose for fuel and we start using ketones for fuel instead. Some of the reported benefits include diabetes management and improved blood sugar control, heart health, cancer risk reduction, and weight loss, to name a few. But what we'll find in this presentation is that these benefits are largely unsupported. Let's briefly review macronutrients. If you want to learn more about carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, you can check out my individual presentations on them under Educate Yourself how-to videos, link on my website, seantheRD.com. Plant foods typically are high in fiber, they're high in water, and they're high in carbohydrates. Most plant foods, with the exception of nuts and seeds, avocados, coconuts, and refined oils, are all typically low in fat. When we look at a diet such as the ketogenic diet that's high in protein and very high in fat, it's going to be a diet that's based on animal foods. Animal foods don't contain any fiber, they're typically low in water, and there's no carbohydrates with the exception of milk. So the ketogenic diet is a high animal food diet. If we rank food on a scale of 1 to 1,000, 1,000 being very high in nutrients and low in calories, and 1 being high in calories and low in nutrients, what we find is that plant foods score very high on this list. So vegetables, moving into fruit, and then into whole grains. Diets such as the ketogenic diet are going to be full of food that's in the red here on the right-hand side. Things like salmon, eggs, milk, chicken, beef, cheese, and olive oil. These foods are very low in nutrients and very high in calories. Ketogenic diets tend to be so nutritionally vacuous that one assessment estimated that to get a sufficient daily intake of all essential vitamins and minerals, you would have to eat more than 37,000 calories per day. This is another way to look at foods. So instead of looking at the nutrient content of foods, this slide shows the calorie content of foods. So vegetables, fruits, beans, we saw that they had a high ANDI score. They were high in nutrients and low in calories. So this graph shows that they're very low in calories, around 550 calories per pound or less. The ketogenic diet is low in nutrient value and high in caloric value. So chicken, for example, is 1,000 calories a pound, and the oils and a lot of that high-fat dairy, those are going to be some of the highest in calories, lowest in nutrients. The first disease state that we're going to be talking about today are diseases of the gastrointestinal tract. So when you look at the human gastrointestinal tract, or the GI tract for short, what you find is that there's a huge surface area, it's very long compared to our height, and it's meant to have foods that are high in fiber. Scientific research shows that our ancestors consumed somewhere between 70 to 100 grams of fiber daily. We had a diet centered around vegetables, fruits, and low in animal products. This is an important distinction because since our GI tract is so long, there's a huge surface area and a lot of time for that food to become absorbed. So when we have a diet that's high in animal protein, fat, cholesterol, heme iron, they tend to get absorbed and have all kinds of negative health consequences. Whereas when you look at the gastrointestinal tract of carnivores, they're very short. So some of these compounds that aren't good for health can move very quickly through their intestinal tract. They tend to move slower through ours. The ketogenic diet is typically very low in fiber because whole grains and beans, which are high in carbohydrates, are also the best sources of fiber. Now, you can have vegetables on the ketogenic diet, but you'd have to eat something like 14 servings of kale per day just to get my recommended amount of fiber of 40 grams per day. So without whole grains and without beans, you're typically going to be deficient in fiber. When we're deficient in fiber, this increases our risk for constipation, and constipation is one of the major causes of hernias, diverticular disease, varicose veins, hemorrhoids, and when we're constipated and straining, it also increases the pressure inside of our brain. The ketogenic diet is not only low in fiber, but it's high in fat, and fat we know causes leaky gut. So when the bacteria in our intestines mixes with fat from a high-fat meal, it's able to permeate through the lining of our intestines, and that is very dangerous because when our immune system goes to attack that bacteria, it inadvertently attacks the lining of our GI tract, and that's when we see conditions such as inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's disease. Foods high in fiber feed our good gut bacteria. They create more diverse populations and better numbers of that good bacteria that'll help reduce our risk for chronic illness and are anti-inflammatory. The second condition that we're going to be talking about is cardiovascular disease. Now, to springboard off the previous slide, we know that fiber helps bind to cholesterol in our intestines so that we don't absorb it. So a diet that's high in fiber helps lower our risk for cardiovascular disease because it helps lower our cholesterol absorption as well as the absorption of a variety of other dangerous compounds and toxins in our GI tract. Now, there are some studies that show weak links between cholesterol, saturated fat intake, and heart disease, but what we know from the best scientific research, double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials, intervention trials, and genetic mutations, that cholesterol and saturated fat are simply not good for our heart. Meat, dairy, eggs, and oil, which are all consumed in high amounts on the ketogenic diet, are dangerous for our health. They're low in phytonutrients or protective plant compounds, and they're relatively low in antioxidants, just like we saw in the low ANDI score. These animal foods tend to be high in heme iron, choline, carnitine, and when we cook meat over high heat such as barbecuing, broiling, and frying, we form advanced glycated end products, heterocyclic amines, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. These also increase our risk for cardiovascular disease. Diets that are high in fat and high in protein cause inflammation and they damage the endothelial lining of our arteries. When the lining of our arteries become damaged, that's when we start to see atherosclerosis or plaque buildup. We know that if we consume a meal that's high in fat, our arteries will stiffen for 3 to 4 hours. High-fat meals interfere with our arteries' ability to constrict and dilate. There's a complete, utter lack of scientific research supporting meat, high-fat dairy, oils, and eggs for heart disease risk reduction. But don't take my word for it. The only diet proven to reverse heart disease is the Dean Ornish diet, which is high in plant foods, high in fiber, and very low in fat. So 10% of its calories or less coming from fat, very, very minimal, if any, added fat in the form of oils. The third condition that we're going to be talking about today is diabetes. Many advocates of the ketogenic diet say that it helps improve diabetes, but what the ketogenic diet does is it improves the symptom of diabetes, which is high blood sugar, but it doesn't improve the cause of diabetes, which is insulin resistance, and it can actually make your insulin resistance worse. So most diabetic diets focus on reducing carbohydrate intake, but we know that carbohydrates aren't necessarily the cause of diabetes. For many people with diabetes, the cause is excess calorie consumption over a long period of time. Whether those excess calories come from carbs, fats, or proteins is irrelevant. When we store fat, we don't just store fat in our hips, our thighs, our butt, around our stomach. But if we gain too much weight, that fat can spill over into our organs and get stored in our pancreas. It can get stored in our liver, such as fatty liver, and it can get stored in our muscles. So when we consume a diet that's high in calories and low in nutrients, such as the ketogenic diet, we can have fat that builds up in our organs and impairs our ability to work with insulin. If you want to see a presentation on diabetes and the specific mechanism as to why people get diabetes, I have one on my website, SeanTheRD.com. Now, the ketogenic diet helps lower blood sugars by severely restricting carbohydrate intake. But again, high blood sugars are a symptom of diabetes, not the cause. What we do know is that protein also requires insulin to be used. So some proponents of the ketogenic diet will say that when we have a diet that's high in fat and moderate in protein, our insulin needs go down. But if you look at the insulin index of foods, there's a high amount of insulin that's needed with diets that are high in protein, such as the ketogenic diet. Not only does a single high-fat meal cause our arteries to stiffen, it also increases insulin resistance. And they can look at that through scientific studies when they infuse fat into the participants' blood, and they see their insulin resistance go up very, very quickly within a few hours. Now, the best dietary approach for diabetes is a diet that focuses first and foremost on weight loss by consuming high nutrient-dense foods, low-calorie dense foods. The next disease that we're going to be talking about is cancer. Most ketogenic diets are high in processed meat, such as bacon, ham, sausage, and also high in red meat. The World Health Organization came out with a report about 5 years ago that classified red meat as a probable human carcinogen and processed meat as carcinogenic to humans. These foods that are typically eaten in large quantities on the ketogenic diet can increase our risk for colon cancer. Over the last 20 years, colon cancer rates have doubled for those under 50 years old, and colon cancer is the third most common cancer and the second cause of cancer death. So it's important to follow a diet that lowers our risk for cancer, not increases our risk for cancer. Ketogenic diets tend to be so nutritionally vacuous that one assessment estimated that to get a sufficient daily intake of all essential vitamins and minerals, you would have to eat more than 37,000 calories per day. Oftentimes people follow the ketogenic diet because they want to lose weight. But the ketogenic diet is not the only diet that can promote weight loss, so weight loss is not exclusive to the ketogenic diet. Health improvements, including weight loss, are often due to a reduced intake of total calories and processed carbohydrates, and that's exactly what we see with the ketogenic diet. Because it's so restricting, and a lot of people start cutting out junk food, snacks, chips, crackers, cookies, desserts, they're going to lose weight because they're eating less of the bad stuff. Oils, meat, and dairy are associated with weight gain, not weight loss. And we saw in one of the previous slides that those foods are the highest in calorie concentration. Scientific studies show that restricting fat calories is more effective for weight loss than restricting carbohydrate calories. And there's two reasons for that. One is that if we overeat on fat calories, we will store them as fat much more easily than if we overeat on carbohydrates. So if you overeat on carbs or protein, in order to convert that to fat, your body will actually burn some of those calories. We also know that high carbohydrate foods, such as beans and whole grains, that when we consume these, some of the calories pass through us without being absorbed. I've read studies that show you can eat 300 to 400 additional calories per day on diets high in plant foods without weight gain. What is the healthiest diet to follow? So what we know from nearly every single major educational institution nationwide, such as UC Davis, San Francisco, Harvard, that diets high in plant foods and low in animal foods, low in meat, dairy, eggs, and added oils are the best for our overall health. We need a diet that's centered around micronutrients and antioxidants, not calories. We need to have fewer calories from added sugars, refined grains, and oils. We need a diet that's lower in pro-inflammatory compounds, such as those that we find in animal foods, and that help fight inflammation, such as fruits and vegetables. We need a diet that helps feed the good gut bacteria, so foods high in fiber like beans and whole grains. These help promote intestinal health. We need a diet that improves our insulin sensitivity and glucose utilization. Diets high in fiber and high in plant foods will slow the absorption of sugar and help improve our insulin sensitivity. We know that the more fruit and whole grains and beans that people eat, the lower their blood sugars can be and the lower their risk for diabetes is. We need a diet that helps protect our arteries from stress and damage. A diet that's high in antioxidants, such as fruits, can help do that. We need more whole, intact plant foods. At least 75% of our foods per day should come from plant foods, and 25% or less from animal foods. We need 40 grams of fiber per day minimum, 10 servings of fruits and vegetables per day minimum. We need beans every day, and we need intact grains such as rice and barley and quinoa. No more than 4 egg yolks per week. We need to avoid or completely eliminate red meat and processed meat. We need to limit lean meat such as chicken and fish to 6 to 8 ounces per day or less, 2 tablespoons per day or less of added oils, and we need to watch the salt. I hope you found some value in watching this presentation. If you have any questions, you can head over to my website, SeanTheRD.com. There's a contact me page and you can send me an email with any questions that you have. I also recommend you check out either the main page or the frequently asked questions page for my ketogenic diet paper. That'll go into more detail on the slides here, as well as my scientific references. And if you go over to the Educate Yourself page, how-to videos, that's where you can find this video, heart-healthy shopping and cooking ideas, my macronutrient videos, my weight loss videos, and all my other content. Thanks again for watching.